everybody, and welcome to the DEARG podcast, the podcast that brings you education and information on endometriosis and adenomyosis. Today, I'm joined by Jane Whelan, who is a yoga instructor from Dublin, and I've known Jane for a long number of years. She very kindly helped out at information days and bringing her knowledge and expertise and absolute wisdom, not just around her life with endometriosis, but also her life with migraine as well. And migraine is one of those conditions that we know over 50% of women with endometriosis will experience. And certainly from my anecdotal experience, I think that percentage is probably a lot higher. Jane, welcome to the podcast. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your role as a yoga practitioner, and also within some of the work that you would have done around migraine in the past?
Sure. Hi, Kathleen. Lovely to chat to you again. It's been a while. So yeah, I can talk a bit more about the endometriosis in a minute, but I suppose I'm almost 50 years of age, living in Dublin, long time living with migraine, about 35 years, and then the endometriosis came a little bit later. But I worked for a long time in the events industry, doing a lot of travel, and my endometriosis really kind of flared up and the migraine flared up. So I would have spent a good chunk of time not really knowing what was going on. But I guess I was also quite fortunate in some ways that I was diagnosed with endometriosis at quite a young age, unlike other people. And I also was working in neurology and had a bit of access to some information on migraine. And I ended up going to work in the migraine community then for a couple of years. I worked for the Migraine Association of Ireland and I worked for the European Headache Alliance. So I was very, very absorbed and immersed in the world of headaches. So I often kind of say there's only a couple of things I know a little bit about, and migraine would definitely be one of them. And then in parallel to all that, I've always worked full time, but I did then about 12 years ago start my yoga teacher training, and actually started a little bit longer because I'm teaching about 12 years now. So it was kind of interesting coming to yoga with the endometriosis, actually, because I really felt it limited me in some ways of what I thought I could and couldn't do. But it's now become part of my self-management strategy for both migraine and the endometriosis. So
and it's so important to have those tools, isn't it? Because we know that, like, you know, two conditions that are inflammatory and quite painful, and, you know, often, you know, pharmaceutical medication is one of the things that we're guided towards, but that's okay during a very short flare-up, but it's the day-to-day management that's really important. And you know, in terms of using yoga as a practice for that, can you tell me how, first of all, you got interested in it and how you then apply it as a self-management tool?
Yeah, well, I should probably start by saying, like, I'll never say to people, oh, yoga's going to fix you and it's going to make everything amazing. You know, it's not. But it can be one of the tools you might use. So for me, it actually has been really beneficial. And I think my interest in yoga came about, I probably did my first yoga class, I think it was 1999 in Australia. And I kind of dipped in and out of it for a little while. Yoga wasn't really that popular back then, so it was kind of harder to find classes, but I kept kind of being drawn back into it. And I think what it was I was traveling a huge amount, doing a lot of international travel. I didn't, because of that and because of the endometriosis pain and the migraine pain, I found myself not really able to do any other physical activity. So I couldn't, you know, I found myself not wanting or not being able to commit to doing even regular weekly classes or doing anything that was with a group of people that I always had the fear of not being able to do something, letting people down, or just not feeling well enough to even go for a walk. Whereas I found yoga, I was going, okay, I can do little bits here and there, and it's something I can do when I am traveling. I can do it in a hotel room. So it sort of came as a thing for dealing with the exhaustion from long haul travel, from dealing in a stressful environment, working on events, of something I could do for myself, irrespective of where I was. And even learning little things like relaxation techniques or breath work that I could do even when I was on a long haul flight to help myself fall asleep. Very practical little things like that. And with the migraine, for me, and I know this is quite common, a lot of people with migraine, one of the first signs of their migraine or the symptom they get is stiffness in their neck. And I thought, you know, 25 years ago, I thought maybe if I could just stretch and get rid of that tension in my neck, I wouldn't get the migraine. But of course, now I know it's the other way around. The migraine has already long started hours before I get the pain in my neck. So I kind of had it backwards. But in my logic at the time, I was thinking, if I can just stretch and do a little bit more. And I was going for a little bit of massage therapy and physical therapy and they would say, okay, we can only do so much. You've got to go do the work yourself now. And you've got to go do these exercises. And, I wasn't very disciplined in doing all of that. But the yoga just became a little way of going, okay, here I can weave in little bits and pieces to do that, help with that tension. And I now have a much better understanding of how much stress and anxiety feed into that cycle with migraine. And, I think any kind of chronic pain. So, I kind of realized, well, if I can get a little handle on managing that, perhaps it will help bring down the frequency or the severity or the duration, or just turn down the volume a little bit on the level of pain. So that's kind of how I kind of got into it. And with the endometriosis, I think, as I say, I was quite lucky. I was diagnosed at 25 or 26. I was actually in Australia for a year, and I hadn't had any trouble with my endometriosis as a teenager. Migraine was more of a problem. My endometriosis only actually became a problem in my early 20s. And it was when I was in Australia, I was going, something's just not right here. And I went to see a doctor and I said, I don't know what I need, but can I have some tests, some scans? Do I need a smear test? There's something not right. I have some pain. And he was kind of limited in what he could offer me because I wasn't a resident there under their health system. But I did get referred to someone who did a scan for me, and she said, you have a cyst in your ovary. I suspect you have endometriosis. You're going to need surgery to get this cyst out. And I was going home shortly afterwards, and I said, well, can the surgery wait till I go home? And she said, absolutely, yeah, no problem. And she gave me a copy of all my scans. She wrote a really detailed letter for my GP. And when I came home to him and gave him everything, he was like, wow, you would never have gotten that type of a scan in Ireland. So he goes, this is brilliant to have this. And, this was 2000. So we're talking like 24 years ago. But my GP was great. He was always a man who was very open-minded about things. And, with my migraine, he said, right, we're going to send you to a neurologist to, find out more about this. And the same with the suspected endometriosis. He said, right, I don't know enough about this. Let's send you to the best person in the country who knows something about this, who at the time was Dr. Hugh O'Connor in the Coombe. So I saw him and went in then shortly afterwards and had the cyst removed and got the confirmation of the diagnosis of endometriosis. So, and at the time there was, very little on the internet. There wasn't much information around. I think he did give me some leaflet on the Endometriosis Association of Ireland. But in my head, I kind of thought, well, I'm fine now. I've had the surgery and he's put me on the pill. I'm going to be okay. I probably don't need this. And I thought, I'm fine now. And of course, the pill then made my migraine worse. So that really triggered off, a lot of hormonal fluctuations and stuff, which really played havoc with my headache. I started the job doing a lot of traveling. So I had years of just the endometriosis kind of being, not too bad, but the migraine being pretty out of control. So I was kind of looking more down the migraine route of managing all of that. And I came off the pill. I was getting married and I thought in my head, well, getting married, I'll probably want to get pregnant in the next year or two. I'll come off the pill and see, does that help my migraines? I had also been trying other preventative migraine medications and came off those to just see what would happen. And of course, as soon as I came off the pill, the endometriosis symptoms all began to become really bad then. So it was obviously just masking it for a few years, and I didn't realize, like probably about 7 years. So that really escalated into, and I suppose it happened kind of gradually, where the pain was just getting worse and worse over time, that I don't think I really realized how bad it was. I was just kind of getting on with it all the time, and it just becomes your normal, until I collapsed at a wedding in 2009 and with just very severe pain. And it turned out I had another cyst in my ovary. So I ended up going and having another surgery, getting that removed, having half my ovary removed and things like that. And then fast forward a couple of years, I still wasn't pregnant, and then went, okay, I've got to go get some investigations done here. And all the time, all my symptoms were just getting worse and worse. And then I did 3 IVF cycles in 12 months. So just my hormones were just chaotic now. And after through all of this, I was still going, I can manage all this myself. I can manage the pain. I can manage the migraine, thinking, oh, well, I've done this and I've done that, and none of it really has worked. So I've just got to work on this myself. And if I can just, I think as women, we're quite hard on ourselves as well. Of just going, no, I just, I need to eat better, sleep better, reduce this, do this, really hard on ourselves. And, it just, yeah, the pain was just getting worse. Now, look, I was very lucky. I didn't have daily pain with my endometriosis, but I would have for a few days a month have just be on the floor with pain. So it wasn't every day, but I realized now there were a lot of other symptoms that I didn't really realize were endometriosis related. So what I was doing at the time was, when I started my teacher training in yoga, I had just had a laparoscopy a couple of months before, and I was still uncomfortable. I was still having pain, and I was afraid to move. So I started my teacher training as a yoga person who was afraid to move, and I was just holding on in my body all the time, which of course then makes you tense up, and pain will always be worse. So that was, when was that? That was 2009, I think. Yeah, a few months after that surgery. So I was on the yoga mat in my training, just scared to move, and by the time I finished my teacher training, I was kind of embarking on the fertility route then. So all my training was very interwoven with what was going on in my reproductive system and my body, and I had become, I think, afraid nearly of my body and didn't trust that my body could do things. When I didn't get pregnant, I thought, well, my body can't do what it's supposed to be able to do. And I, lost a lot of that kind of confidence, I suppose, in my body. And where I think the yoga came into it was that, I can remember being at a point, I was trying to get pregnant and in around all those IVF cycles and stuff, and just being on the floor in pain and not being able to do my practice and saying, God, I should be doing more. I'm becoming a yoga teacher and I should be able to do X, Y, Z. But really all I was able to do was really small, simple stuff. And I found I found it very difficult to get information that was specific to where I was and what I needed. But I had a realization one day that I had been learning about, practices for women in the early stages of labor. And I thought, I'm going to try those because my pain is so bad. Maybe these will help. You know what? They did. So that's what I would do. I would just get on the floor and do all these gentle little movements with my hips. I would do some breath work. It's all very slow, small movements. And they did help. So, but I'd be waiting for my medication to kick in, but it was really something very helpful to do. I'm not saying that I didn't take medication, I did, but it was something to do when I'd be going, I know I'm going to have half an hour here of severe pain where I'm not going to be able to stand up, where I'm barely able to breathe. And I would go, okay, there's something I can do here. I can take back a bit of control and I can do something to help myself here. And that was that realization of going, oh, okay, hold on a second. There are things I can do. So even just realizing changing the position of my body, of what shape I'm making, actually might change the space in my pelvis and change the pain. And it did. So I just experimented and found what worked for me. So that's kind of, yeah. So when people talk about yoga, I think a lot of the time people think people are standing on their head and making contemplate. Whereas actually for me, a lot of it was lying down, maybe on my back, maybe on my side, doing some breath work, doing some gentle movement maybe on hands and knees, or, really gentle kind of stuff. And I found it very helpful. And then I found it all very helpful as I was going through all those IVF cycles of just dealing with the ups and downs and the day, all that uncertainty of just having some tools to use. And I was really only learning at the time. So, now I probably know a lot more. I know more of what would have helped me at the time, but I just used what I had, so.
And it's amazing you've mentioned there's so many things. I can feel the hair in the back of my neck standing up, like when you're talking about the pain, and we literally fold ourselves into little tiny knots, don't we? And even that very simple act of even getting on all fours on the ground and just trying to stretch the pelvis out and things like that. There's so many little things that we can do. And you've always heard me get on about the 1% theory, and it is one of those things. While you're waiting on the pain meds, or while you're waiting on the kettle to boil for the hot water bottle, whatever it is, there's always something we can be doing. And I think myself, like a lot of people, were very frightened of things like yoga or Pilates or anything at all that involves movement or stretching. And I think it's one of the things that we don't have enough information on, but we don't allow ourselves either. Like, and you definitely touched there on the point that we're very stoic. We're women, we can carry this, we can battle on, we can do everything. And for the most, that's quite good. But when you're in pain and you're suffering and there's a lot going on, taking that step back is so important. And, certainly a lot of the practices I've seen some of the research on it as well, is around the yoga nidra practice. And is that something that's more gentle?
So yoga nidra is you're not actually moving. So it's like a deep relaxation. So you're bringing yourself, and you know what? I used that, I think, every night for 2 years. Because I would often, and I say this is common enough with people with endometriosis, I would find my pain will kick off at about 3:30 in the morning. So I would wake up in an awful lot of pain, and I wouldn't have had that opportunity to go, I can feel something starting, I'll take my meds now. It was literally waking up in agony, and waking up maybe to find that the bed was a mess, and which was awful when I was traveling as well and staying in hotels and getting up and going, oh my goodness, the bed sheets, so I used to sleep on towels in hotels and just layer up and just, so then of course you're lying asleep going, I'm afraid to go to sleep in case I wake up and something's happened, so I found yoga nidra amazing, because what you're doing is, in yoga nidra, you're technically not trying to fall asleep, you're trying to stay awake and alert, but you allow yourself to go into a deep state of relaxation. So I'm not saying it's going to work for you like the first 1 or 2 times that you do it, but it's a practice like everything else. The more you do it, the more your brain begins to go, I know what's going on here, and switches off. And I went through a tough period of pain and not being able to sleep. And I came across one particular yoga nidra recording, and it was designed that actually at the end, the voice would say to slip off and go to sleep. And I used it every night for 2 years to go to sleep. And it just, even if you're not sleeping, it just brings you into that deep state of relaxation. So your body does feel rested. So it's the practice that actually, for me, I think has been the most beneficial throughout everything. It hasn't necessarily been all the movement. People think yoga is about being flexible and being strong and all that, but actually for me, the yoga nidra has been the most therapeutic practice, and I would recommend it to anybody, because you do it lying down, and traditionally people would say you do it lying on your back, but the most important thing is to be comfortable. So I'd always say to people, do it lying on your side, loads of cushions, pillows, blankets, be comfortable, be warm. You want to feel that you're in a safe space where your body can go and relax. So that's definitely a practice I would put at the top of the list for anybody, and it's something you can do yourself at home. I think sometimes people think with yoga, oh, I've got to go to classes or I've got to go to a studio. I would have had periods where I couldn't. I really struggled with that, because either I was traveling a lot or I just didn't feel well enough. I just feel heavy with the pain, going, I don't want to go to class. I don't want to move. Whereas I would be happier to just do my own practice of knowing what would work, so. But it did reach a point where I found I feel a little bit better in my body. I feel a little bit safer. Now I can try a little bit more. And it kind of grew from there, that I suppose I brought back a little bit of confidence in my body and what it can do, after years of feeling my body was useless and my brain was useless with migraine and everything. So yoga has given me back that I feel, no, my body is good and it's strong, and I can't do everything, but I can do enough. That's fine. So and the breath work I would have found very useful for pain as well. When you get awful shooting pains and you just catch your breath and you go, okay, I've got to just breathe again. So I would have found a lot of those very helpful, particularly on long haul flights when you're sitting in a seat and you can't move and you're squirming in pain. And so what I'm talking about. Yeah.
There's no running up and down the aisles to get that one cleared, like.
No, and you can't lie down. You're sitting in the chair going, I can't move. What am I going to do here? And that's where some of the breathwork techniques, really, really simple stuff, nothing complicated, that all kind of helped,
And I think that's the temptation, isn't it, for us to think that this has to be complicated, or it has to be that we're doing, really complicated asanas that we've seen online, or people are in the white leggings and they're in the wee bra tops and they're in a gorgeous studio in California, and we're thinking, no, that's not me.
No, we live in a house where it's cold and we need our food to do. And I would say I do yoga in my pajamas more than anything else, and there would be certain positions and asanas I would get into, and I would have the hot water bottle on my back and I would blanket over me, so I would incorporate these things and just make them comfortable for me. And I think that's what's really important. Your symptoms and your pain is individual to you. And I think a yoga practice has to be individual to you as well. It's not what you might be seeing on Instagram or seeing online. A lot of the stuff you see online is quite strong stuff. And it might be fine on days where you're feeling great and feeling you can do things, but it's perfectly fine to just sit on the floor or lie down on the floor, or, you know, really simple stuff. So I've done quite a little bit of stuff for the migraine community in yoga, and I just teach people really, really simple stuff, you know, and I think people are sometimes surprised at how beneficial something quite simple can be, you know. So.
And I think, like endometriosis, migraine has very little definitive research in it. Like, we know that there are certain triggers for certain people, or we know that certain things can make it worse. Very similar to an endometriosis flare, if you've got stress or hormonal fluctuations and a lot of things like that. And for anybody who's not familiar with migraine, can you take us through maybe some of the symptoms of it and how it would affect you then as well?
Yeah, so look, I think most people know what a headache is, unless they're incredibly lucky that they've never had a headache. Migraine is not just a headache. So some people will get migraine without a headache at all. Okay, so vestibular migraine is one where people will get a lot of vertigo and balance kind of problems, but they may not necessarily get a headache. Some people will even get migraine with an aura, so they'll get maybe visual flashing lights or disturbances, everything goes out of focus, and they have to go lie down, but they won't necessarily get the headache. Some people will, some people won't. So there's a bit of it's not a myth, but, you know, people associate it with being a headache, but it's so much more. And if you do get the headache, it tends to be on the severe side. So in my case, from early teens, I would just start vomiting, really bad pain in the side of my head, and couldn't stand light, would have to just lie down, maybe not even on a bed, I'd have to lie on the floor, something that just wasn't moving. And usually sleep would make it better, and I'd feel better the next day. And then as I got a bit older, it was lasting longer, and it might take 3 days for it to actually clear. So it is very individual. For me, the severe pain and the vomiting was a big thing. As I got older, the vomiting, I don't vomit so much anymore. I'll get the severe pain, but I get a lot more vestibular symptoms, I've realized. But I'm on a preventive medication, which has really helped me. So I'm not, like I say, I'm not saying, oh, yoga's helped me. You know, it's one of the things I do. But I realized as I got older and learned more about migraine, that stress and anxiety were feeding into that migraine cycle. So I would be looking at the calendar going, oh my good God, my period is coming in 10 days time, and I've got a work trip. And despite myself, in the back of my head, I will be worrying, going, I'm going to be on the floor with pelvic pain, and I'm probably going to get a migraine as well. So that's where the two really began to intertwine, you know. And for me, it was always with migraine, it is so individual, and people's triggers are very individual. A lot of mine was hormonal, but a lot of it was also that stress and anxiety. I've realized as I've gotten older, some of it is also weather related. So a drop in a low pressure front, I'll tend to get one. So I can be doing everything else properly, minding myself, eating, sleeping, keeping hydrated, doing everything right, and I'll still get one out of the blue, you know. But and a lot of the research will say exercise is proven to be very good in preventing migraine or reducing your frequency, you know. So I'd be hearing this going, okay, medication, exercise, but I'd be going, I can't exercise, and I just can't. I can't even go for a walk, or, you know, on the days I feel okay with that migraine, maybe I've got pelvic pain. So it was just this vicious cycle of going, how do I get my way out of this? And I think that's where yoga did help me, because now I'm at a point where I'm doing things I never thought I'd be able to do. I'm playing tennis. I did do a little bit of running. I don't particularly like running, so I've given up the running, but I'm playing tennis, and I'm just doing things I never thought I'd be able to do. I've been doing a bit of strength training, trying to mind my bones, you know, things that before I would have gone, there's no way I can do that. I'm going to get a flare up of pelvic pain, or I'd go running and I'd bleed, or, you know, all these kind of things. So I think it's been, you know, with migraine, we talk about finding your own individual triggers, and it's not always easy. As I say, I'll sometimes get migraine out of the blue with no apparent trigger. I now just go, you know what, I don't even try figuring it out. I just go, it is what it is. I accept it's there, and it'll go. But I do think the management of it has to be very individual. So, and I do think it's the same for endometriosis. Just because somebody tells you, well, I did this and it works for me, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for you, but maybe it's worth a try, you know. So for me now, my management of the two, and it was a little bit tricky actually, because with my endometriosis, my gynecologist was saying, you know, why aren't we treating this hormonally? You know, I think hormones would really help your symptoms. And I was resisting it, going, no, I'm scared to throw hormones into my body because I'm afraid of what's going to happen to my migraine. And because of my experience in my 20s, I just went, I'm so scared of that. I just can't imagine it getting any worse. But eventually I did reach a point where I went, maybe I need to consider it, because I was taking, what she advised me to do was take, I was taking Ponston actually for 5 days a month coming up to my period to just reduce all the inflammation. But I developed an allergy to that. So I had to stop taking that. And also I was a bit concerned because my migraine was quite bad at the time. I was in chronic migraine, and they really say to you to try not to take painkillers as often as you maybe think you need them. Try and keep it down to maybe 4 to 6 days a month. And I was going, that's impossible to try and keep my painkiller use to days a month, especially when I've got endometriosis. It's just impossible. So I was always conscious of the painkillers I'm taking for my endometriosis are actually making my migraine worse. So it was this balance of how do I do this? So I eventually did say, do you know what? Okay, I'll try the hormones and see what happens. And for me, it was the best decision ever. So I'm now on the progesterone only pill, and it just, after a while, I just went, I should have done this a long time ago. I was so resistant to it. And I think it's just interesting to kind of go, yeah, sometimes something you've tried before, you might go, didn't work for me then. It doesn't mean it's never going to work, because for me, 20 years later, it did help and it did work. And I guess it just depends on, maybe things move on, medications change, there's more information. So for me, it was life-changing, and I found I was able to do a bit more, get a bit more kind of, I suppose, confidence back in my body that I can do this, and I don't need to be living in this constant fear of, am I going to be on the floor in pain, or what if I get this massive bleed and I'm in the middle of something, or, you know, so that's massively helped. And it also did help, as well as the endometriosis symptoms, it helped, actually, it got rid of endometriosis symptoms. I didn't even realize were endometriosis symptoms. Because I used to think, oh, it's just a few days a month that I have symptoms, but actually I realized, no, I have all these other symptoms. I didn't really put 2 and 2 together. And then the migraine actually didn't get any worse going on the pill. It actually helped level out with hormonal fluctuations. So yeah, the migraine, I'm not going to say it got better, but it did change some of the migraine. So anyone who gets regular migraine will know what I'm talking about, that you'll get the really severe ones and you'll get the other ones in between that maybe aren't quite so bad. And some of those really severe ones can be the hormonally related ones, and they can be really, they are the hard ones to treat. Listening to neurologists, they are the ones that are more severe, they last longer. So having your right treatment strategy for those is really important. So for me, it was like this whole balancing act going on for years of just, you know, and at the same time all going, I should be able to manage this. You know, I'm doing my yoga, I should be able to relax more. But life is going on around you, you know, oh, you're just constantly dealing with the ups and downs of life and stuff, you know. So I think I'm now going, oh my God, I shouldn't have been so hard on myself. And I should have tried a few things a little bit earlier. And so actually last year I found myself going, I'm definitely in perimenopause. And what do I do now about my endometriosis? What happens next? So it is this thing, isn't it? Just we're constantly, there's never the full answer. You're constantly going, okay, I've got that sorted, but now this. So I've had this constant thing of the migraine and the endometriosis. I'm moving into a different phase of life now. What happens now? Are things going to get worse? And last year I did have just a bad month of hormonal fluctuations, and my migraine went out of control just a month, and I had a lot of joint pain, and I just had suspicions of what I was going. I have sensations in my pelvis that I'm going, it's not pain, but the fear was beginning to come back of, oh, I recognize this, I don't like this. And I had to tap into all my yoga kind of thing of going, okay, just be in the moment and just don't be leaping ahead into fear of what it is. But I did, I read up a few things. I read Deirdre Lundy's great book, which I found really helpful because she has migraine and she has a good chapter on endometriosis. And I thought, I've got the knowledge now. I don't think I need to do anything. But about a month later, I went, I need to talk to my GP. So I said to her, look, what, you know, maybe I do need some estrogen now as well. And we chatted about it. And she was great because she said, look, when we put estrogen into your body, don't know what's going to happen with your endometriosis or your migraine. It's going to be, you're just going to have to try it and see. But I have to say, I'm on it now 6 months. 7 months, and I feel good. I feel good. There's been no endometriosis symptoms back, and the migraine stayed relatively calm. So I'm like, okay, maybe it's all the other stuff that I'm doing as well, is helping maintain things, you know. So,
Mhm.
and I'm doing things like a bit more regular exercise now. And, you know, I do think when I think back to my 30s, like, oh God, it was tough, because when you're in pain every day, you know, you should be doing all these things, and you should be eating right, and you should be trying to get out and get some fresh air and go for a walk. And it becomes this list of I should.
Yeah.
And when you're not feeling well, it's so hard to do that, you know.
Mm.
So, you know, now I'm going, well, I'm glad I did
Yeah.
look at going, yep, try the medical thing again. Just because it didn't work years ago doesn't mean it's not going to work now. Try it.
Mhm.
And combined with all the other things I do now as well, and the breath work and my meditation and my physical practice, all of these things combined now, I think I'm in a pretty good place
Yeah.
hormonally and headache wise as well. So
That is brilliant. And again, I just love your approach to it, that, like, you know, looking at that fear, addressing that fear is there as well, but also going back and trying it and trying things as well too, because, you know, like, we're a very similar age, and, you know, again, a lot of our 20s and 30s maybe are lost to that sort of fear and inability to do certain things. But certainly with perimenopause, it brings about that whole sort of roller coaster of changes again. And for me, it was the big fear of migraine coming back, and it
yeah,
did flare a little bit for me with the initial treatment, but, like, you know, touch wood, now it's settled again.
yeah,
But I think one thing there, you know, with the fear is, you know, and you see again a lot of inspirational Instagram posts, you know, about embracing fear and getting on with it. But when you're in the middle of something like that, and this is probably where your yoga practice has probably come in quite strong, how do we develop that sort of mind-body connection where we can sort of acknowledge maybe what's going on in the body, and just sort of go, okay, like, I know this is frightening, I know this is temporary, you know, and making that sort of plan with yourself. Is there something that within yoga practice that would help us strengthen that, do you think?
yeah. It's probably a meditation practice. And one of the you know, I think sometimes people think meditation is sitting in a room quietly and not thinking of anything. And of course, we can't do that. Our brain, our mind is constantly go, 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 go. So, you know, you can't just switch everything off. For me, a practice that I found very helpful is it's a lovely Buddhist meditation called the Metta Bhavana, loving kindness practice. And I've been using that for years. I teach it a lot, and it's one where you start with yourself, because as we always say, you can't fill from an empty cup, so you got to look after yourself first. And I think when you are living with chronic pain, you're living with a lot of difficulty, you probably do need to be a little bit kinder to yourself. So you start with yourself, and it's a simple little practice of just thinking about something that makes you happy, maybe thinking of a situation or, you know, someone that you love, and feeling that lovely feeling, and then directing it towards yourself. And then you just repeat a mantra of, may I be happy, may I be well, may I be safe, may I be free of pain, you know, those little things. So that's a meditation I've used quite a lot over the years. Or even, you know, I know at the times where I've had a lot of just pain and I feel like I'm just gripping and holding on, I've simply done a very simple meditation practice of, you know, breathing in, um, just breathing in peace, you know, breathing out stress and anxiety, and just a very simple breathing in calm, breathing out stress, those kind of little simple things. And it just switches your brain from that, oh my gosh, what's happening here? How long is this going to last? Oh my God, I've got a meeting, or I've got to drive somewhere. Oh God, what am I going to do? Just switching off from that into something else of going, I am okay. And not in meditation and those kind of things, it's also doing everything in the present tense rather
Yes.
than I will be okay. It's about I am okay. So it's changing a little bit the mindset, and it's not just a magic switch that you're clicking and it happens overnight. It is a practice you develop over time. So I think that's helped me enormously through things, and particularly around the time, if I think back to my failed IVF cycles and just feeling just let down by my body and let down by science and everything, and just that despair and that hormonal feeling everything's out of control, because that's how I felt. You know, I felt I have no control over anything anymore. And just having that little simple practice of just being able to sit with yourself and going, I am okay, I'm fine. May I be happy, may I be well, may I be safe. Just making you feel I can't control everything, but I control how I am right now in this moment. So I think that's where those practices can begin to help you stop catastrophizing things, what, dwelling on things. It's easier said than done, it's taken me a long time and many years of practice, and my practice dips, it's not like my meditation practice now, I do meditate daily, but there's been periods where it's been, a little bit sporadic, but I do find when I'm doing it properly, I feel better. And on the times where I feel frazzled and I go, I can't sit and do this, the breath work is enormously important. So I would often say to people, when people say to me, oh, do you do yoga every day? And I know they mean, am I physically doing yoga every day? I'll say, yes, I do my yoga every day, but it's my breath work I do every day. And it can only be 5 minutes. But before I get out of bed in the morning, I'll do some breath work. And I'll usually do the breath work before the meditation, because it just leads you, and you talked about that the mind-body connection. So doing the breath work can bring you very much out of your mind back into your body. And then it's a bit easier to do the meditation practice.
And it's like anything, isn't it? Like we, even just by walking, we strengthen our muscles. By repetitive action, we're going to strengthen that, and that mind body and that sort of brain physical connection as well too. We do need to practice and need to strengthen it. And I think too, it's like anything, isn't it, that we don't beat ourselves up if we're not doing this to 100% every day, because sometimes if you can only manage 10%, well, it's better than nothing, isn't it?
Yeah. Do what you can, and do because I felt very much like that about that when I was doing my teacher training. I was just going, I'm not doing enough. I'm not doing enough. I'm not doing enough. And my tutors kept saying, what you're doing is yoga. You are doing enough. And I'm doing is my breath work. And they were like, that's yoga. You're doing it. So, and then over time you realize, that is what it is. So.
And in terms of yoga being accessible for patients who are people who are living with endometriosis or migraine symptoms, is there any contraindications? Is there anything that we should look out for if we're looking to an instructor or a class or even online? Like, is there anything that we should really watch out that could make things worse?
I think this is where the research is lacking. I think sometimes, like in yoga, people will say, oh, you shouldn't go upside down when you're menstruating. And there's no evidence really of showing why you shouldn't do that, and we know, like, that myth about, I'm gone blank in the word now. Here's the hormones. But as that myth about endometriosis being caused by blood flowing back the wrong way and stuff, so sometimes I think there's a bit of a myth of people going, oh, you shouldn't go upside down because the blood's going to go the wrong way. And we know it can't go the wrong way. Like it's going to get out anyway, So for me, I'm like, you know what, if you go upside down as part of your regular practice and you feel okay doing it, do it. For me, doing those inversions isn't what I necessarily want to do, but that's probably more so because of migraine. I just think do what feels right in your body. I hate seeing things, you're talking about the inspirational Instagram. I hate seeing things online of 10 poses to make you whatever, So when I see those kind of things, 10 poses to help with fertility or 10 poses to, it's a load of rubbish, because there's no right pose for everybody. And it's got to be what's right for you on any given day, in any moment, not what someone else is telling you, because they don't know what it's like to be in your body, in your mind. So I think it has to be a very individual practice. So I would say, I think it depends on where people are. So start where you are. If you're living with a lot of daily pain, you might just start with some simple breath work, listening to some yoga nidra. That's where I would certainly be starting. And then moving on to a little bit of gentle movement. If you can find a restorative yoga class anywhere near you, maybe go and try that, because that's going to stretch out the body in a very, very gentle way, with lots of support and pillows and blankets, and really kind of comfortable, and just bring you into a stage where you can allow your body to release a bit of tension, and that might help with a bit of pain. So I think that could be one that could be very helpful for people. And yoga goes through trends like everything else. When I was training to be a teacher, everything was about Ashtanga yoga, dynamic yoga, these fast paced, vinyasa yoga phrase you hear a lot. It's a lot of flowing sequences. I couldn't do them because I was just going, I'm in too much pain to do these. And I didn't like the fast movement. My head didn't like going up and down. I need to do that quite slowly. I found, a couple of times the practice would not so much that it would aggravate the pain, but it actually sometimes I would find things like, particularly doing lunges and stuff, would actually free up my pelvis and get rid of a bit of tension. But then I would find that if it was around the time of my period, suddenly things would start flowing a lot faster. So there are things that can be good if you have that heavy congested feeling, you know, where you just go, I just want this to start and just get out of. There were certain movements I did find that would help with that. So I don't think there's any contraindications. I think just trust in your own body of what feels good for you, not necessarily what someone else is telling you. But I do think if you're living with a lot of pain, just starting with slow and small, not, you know, just maybe finding some very simple, straightforward videos. Some chair yoga videos could be really helpful as well. So if you're like, I can't stand up or I'm too uncomfortable to sit on the floor, look for chair yoga videos, because some of those are fantastic. And even though you might have pain around the pelvis and the lower body, your neck and shoulders might just like a nice stretch sitting in a chair. So chair yoga, I think, can be really helpful for people who are just feeling fatigued. I think that's one of the symptoms I found with endometriosis, was just the fatigue of going, I can't stand up and stand on one leg, forget today, you know. So just sit in the chair and do some stuff in the chair, you know. It doesn't have to be anything complicated, you know. So and in terms of looking for a class, I think, yeah, if you can find a restorative class, brilliant. Otherwise, hatha yoga, people love to talk about what are the different types of yoga. They all kind of come from hatha yoga, but a general hatha class will probably go to a little bit of a slower pace. So you won't have maybe all that flowing of stepping up and down and back and forth and in and out of planks and downward dogs and stuff that you might just go, actually, my body's too heavy and fatigued to do a lot of this. I just want something slow and steady. Hatha yoga might be something to look for. If you see a somatic yoga class, that's another one that's all about small movements. So it can be really beneficial for people in chronic pain, and that could be good. So yeah, I think it just depends on where you're at and what other physical activity you're doing, you know. And if you can just learn a few little poses that you go, that feels good for me, I like it, just do it yourself, even for minutes at home, you know. So I wouldn't have any, I mean, I'd say to people in the migraine community, just be a little bit wary about the hot yoga classes, because that environment is so hot and the dehydration trigger a headache. So, you know, but I think it's individual. It's do what feels good for you, you know. I know a good place. I did my training with Yoga Therapy Ireland, and that's much about making yoga accessible for everybody, irrespective of age or, you know, illness or anything like that. So it's pretty comprehensive training. It's a 500-hour training course, which is unusual. A lot of people just do a 200-hour one. This one is 500 hours with 50 hours anatomy and physiology, which is more than most training courses. Well, so they do have a list of teachers on their website. If you just go to Yoga Therapy Ireland and click find a class, there's a whole listing there, and people could ring somebody and explain, look, I'm living with chronic pain, I'm living with endometriosis, would your class be suitable for me, or could you suggest something? And that's, you know, and maybe somebody might go, okay, I don't have classes that are suitable, but here's somebody else in the area who might be helpful, you know. And I think it's always good to have a chat with the teacher and just tell them, you know, some days I have a lot of pain, some days I don't, some days, you know, and the teacher will want you to be comfortable in the class. So I would always say to people, you know, just let the teacher know. And if there's a movement that you go, I don't like that, you know, or it doesn't feel good in my body, the teacher will have an alternative, some other variation that might be doing the same thing, but might feel better for you and your body. And like that, I teach a class which is a total mixture of people in it and different ages. There's people, I'd say 40 up to 75, and everybody in the class has something going on in their body. So we start the class in the chair, and then I say to people, you can stay in the chair, you can come to the floor, you can stand up. So there'll be different people in the class doing the same thing in a different variation. So and it kind of works. So don't feel, if you are going to a class, don't feel you have to do the same thing as everybody else, you know. And have a chat with the teacher and just let them know, listen, I am in a bit of pain today, you know, maybe I don't want to do this, is there something else I can do instead? Or, you know, and you might just find, like, sometimes I find as a teacher, you know, giving people permission to try what feels good for them can sometimes be a good option as well, you know. And I tutor other teachers sometimes, and I say, you know, some of the best learnings from for me have been from the people in my class. So I had a lady come to class for a while who had very bad arthritis in both hips. She couldn't sit in the chair, she couldn't sit on the floor. She did the whole class standing up. So, and for the relaxation at the end, when everyone else was lying on the floor, she would just stand against a wall for a bit of support and do her relaxation standing up. I learned so much from her because I went, you've got to, as a teacher, you've got to let go of saying this is how you do it. And sometimes just permission to go, you work out what feels right for you in your body today and see. So that, you know, I think that's my advice to people is don't have to do everything in the class, you know, see what works for you. And also, you know, fatigue is a big thing for people with pain or chronic illness. So if at a certain point you just want to lie down, just lie down. You don't have to do everything. You know, so I'm always encouraging people to go stop before you feel tired. And if all you want to do is come into the class and lie down, do that. That's fine. I'm not going to judge you for coming in and doing that. That's totally fine. So
it is, and again, it's giving ourselves permission to go and do something like that and take that 45 minutes or an hour, you know, whatever the class is, or even that, you know, 4-minute breath work that will pop up on your watch every now and again, you know. It's all giving ourselves those little spaces to do that. And definitely having a conversation with the teacher and having that, you know, realistic expectation as well too, because I think we're so bombarded on social media and TV and a lot of things, and we do have unrealistic expectations about any treatment or any therapy or any form of exercise or movement or anything. So I think bringing that back to a form of reality and what's accessible is brilliant. And even chatting to other people who've maybe been to classes, as you say, somebody with arthritis or somebody else with a different chronic pain, like you can find people that way. Like I'll pop those links in the show notes as well too, which would be brilliant. Like, it'll help people sort of find somebody in their area as well. And I think from both an endometriosis and a migraine point of view, because, you know, if you've got one, you're more likely to be diagnosed with the other. You know, and certainly women have a higher instance of migraine as well too. Do you think that there's enough education on, where we know there's not enough education on endometriosis? We're working on that. Is there enough education, do you think, at sort of school level, like from the migraine side? Because I know myself, I started when I was 7 and it was completely unknown. So do you think it's changed?
Not really. I think it's slow. Yeah, no, there's still a huge amount to do. And I know the Migraine Association have done a huge amount with the Irish College of GPs, that GPs are way more informed now. I know in my own practice where I go, I think I've seen all of the GPs and they're all way more informed on migraine. And I do find on women's health, they are amazing as well. So, but I think in schools, that's sort of still, I think there's a lot to be done there. It's happening, but it's a little bit slower, you know, so it's hard. And I do feel quite passionate about that, because I go, if you can get young people with migraine to get a handle on it early, they're way less likely to become chronic. You know, if I knew now, or if I knew back when I was 15 what I know now, I would never have become chronic. I would have known how to manage it, but the education and the awareness wasn't there, you know?
That's it.
So, and I think that's, you know, to link it back to yoga, I think if you're going to a class, don't assume your yoga teacher is going to know anything about migraine and endometriosis, you know, because we know the average person, we know our own group of friends and family go, what? I don't know about that. You know, what is it? So a teacher's not going to know, and they are just a yoga teacher, you know, they're not going to have the answers. So I think being open with them and explaining to them is going to help them understand a little bit more. And I know where I did my training, they do a sort of a therapeutic yoga. It's an advanced teaching skills diploma to go and work with specific communities, and they do a neurology part on it. And I've gone and spoken to them on migraine, because I said it is the most common neurological disorder. You know, you might be going in to teach people with Parkinson's or MS or all these other neurological disorders, but actually migraine is what you're going to see day to day in your classes. Or people don't come to your class because they're not able to come anymore because the environment doesn't suit them with their migraine. And it's the same with endometriosis. And I think there's not enough awareness, you know, that a lot of teachers will think, this is what I'm teaching and this is how it is, and this is the practice you do every day. Whereas as women, you go, actually, do you know what, our bodies are different every day of the month, and we've got to respect that. So your practice isn't going to be the same throughout the month. You know, I think people think, I'm going to go and I'm going to learn this sequence, I'm going to do it every day, and this kind of very driven kind of thing. And it's like, no, there's going to be days where your practice is lying down and having a rest. And then there's the days where you're going to do a little bit more work, you know, to maybe strengthen something like that. So I think that's something in the yoga community that I can see there's a bit of a shift as well. You know, so much of it has come from male lineages of teaching where men just have to think about these things. And now there's a little bit more of a shift of like, well, hold on, we as women, our bodies don't work in the same way as men. Yeah. So why are we doing these practices that have been designed for male bodies? They're not. So I think intuitively we know this and we feel it in our bodies. So I think it is a little bit, we always say, listen to your body, but sometimes we don't know how to listen to our bodies because we're bombarded with other stuff. So I think it's sometimes taking a step back. And I know on that course, that advanced teaching skills thing, I've been banging on to them for years going, yeah, it's a great course, but where's women's health in all of this? You know, we need to be doing more in women's health. So they've now turned around and gone, well, you keep talking about it, you come and do it. So so I'm a little bit scared going, oh gosh, but I'm doing it. It's amazing on women's health as well. And it's really just like that of you know, talk to teachers of, well, somebody living with endometriosis, which is when what are the practices that actually would be more beneficial to them? Yeah. What are the things we need to think of? So yeah, so I'm looking forward to doing that and hopefully getting a few more yoga teachers thinking in that mindset of it doesn't have to be the same way for everybody, and people will have different needs on different days and different weeks. So, and also as we go through the different stages of our life as well.
That's it. And that's it. And that's one of the things we're very blessed with as women, even though we curse it a lot of the times, we do have those cycles, and not just our day-to-day cycles. We also have, you know, those cycles where we're like, you know, pre-period, the years we have our periods, the pre-menopause, the post-menopause, and they all bring their own challenges, but they also bring like that fresh start again, don't they? Every month or every cycle or every period is a fresh start, you know. Yeah. And certainly I'm starting to see now more evidence come through for, you know, athletes and players at different times of the month. They will perform differently, and I'm delighted to see that's coming into some of the training now for women and coming into coaching as well too. So it's starting to filter down very slowly. And I know when I've done school talks recently, and we've brought up, you know, that migraine is, you know, one of the associations, and you can see the little light bulbs going on in some of the heads, and they're like, oh, hang on a minute, you know. And then you start chatting about the changes in the cycle and how, you know, one day you can run the length of the pitch, no problem. The next day you really would struggle to get out of bed or have a walk, you know, and that's totally normal and that's totally fine. And I think we're starting to get there, but it's very, very slow, but it's good to see that progress. And I think too, women were just looked at in all sports medicine and medicine itself as just being small men, and I think we're finally starting to get rid of that.
Yeah. No, it is good to see. Yeah, definitely little shifts here and there. Yeah.
Good to see the change. Jane, it has been fantastic chatting to you. We could probably chat all day about tips and tricks. What I'll do is I'll pop your links in the show notes, and thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you. And yeah, and look, my Instagram, if people want to get in touch with me, I do have Jane Whelan Yoga at gmail.com as a contact. And my Instagram account is actually Yoga for Migraine. I can't remember why I picked that, but anyway, I have it now. But I'm very happy, you know, if people have little questions, very happy to help people if I can. And actually I did if people are looking for just somewhere to start, that maybe they've no yoga experience and they just want to know a little bit more. I did do a talk for the Migraine Association just a few weeks ago, and it's just occurring to me now that it actually might be quite helpful. I just explain a little bit more about yoga, and I do a short little practice sitting in the chair, just some little gentle stretches, and it would be very appropriate for people in the endometriosis community as well. So I probably should do a recording for people with endometriosis. It's one of those things in my head that I go, one of these days when I have a bit more time, I'll do more of these things. You know, there's just not enough hours in the day when I'm working full time, and then I'm doing the teaching, I'm doing some tutoring. So it's just trying to find the time. But in the meantime, maybe that's a little video that might be helpful for people. So I'll just check if Instagram is up to date, that there's a link there. It's easy to find.
Perfect.
And the association have it on their feeds as well. So, and the Migraine Association, if there are people finding their migraine is causing them a lot of debilitation and they want more information, the Migraine Association have a good good lot of support, and they have a nurse helpline as well, which is really helpful if there's medical questions or medication questions. Because for me, that was one of the big things I really struggled with, getting the medication right for the endometriosis and the migraine. So having access to somebody to run questions by who's medically trained can be quite helpful. So they have some resources that may be good for people.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's a fantastic resource. And I'll pop those links in there, and also a link over to your Instagram as well. Like, you know, that'd be brilliant. Be perfect.
Very happy to help anyone I can if people have questions.
Brilliant. Appreciate that. Okay, thank you for listening to DEARG, and we'll chat to you all again soon.